It's time for the Larry H. Miller Utah Summer Games at Southern Utah University in Cedar City. Register today to participate in the 40th anniversary season of a Utah sports tradition at utahsummergames.org. Participate in over 50 sports around the state. Then plan to join the opening ceremonies Friday, June 5th, presented by State Bank of Southern Utah. Register today to participate in the 40th anniversary season of the Larry H. Miller Utah Summer Games.
Do you love the Tabernacle Choir? This year, the choir's music is everywhere you are. Listen to your favorite choir songs and music and the spoken word anytime you want on Alexa by simply enabling the skill.
Alexa, play music in the spoken word.
Now playing music in the spoken word.
You can also download the Tabernacle Choir app, subscribe to the choir on YouTube, listen on Spotify, and have access to all their wonderful music. Happy listening.
Believe it or not, this guy actually has friends.
Nice.
This is Scotty G and Friends on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Scott Gerard with you. We're down here at Spanish Fork. Bar WB pop-up location. All kinds of great savings on the beef right now. And if you have not tried Bar WB, first off, shame on you. Second of all, you can get that rectified really quickly. You stop by here at the Cal Ranch store in Spanish Fork, this pop-up location. I want people to try this sampler pack because you're going to try everything that Bar W can really kind of showcase. You got the ground beef, 4 pounds of ground beef. You got a chuck roast of about 4 pounds. You got 2 sirloin steaks, and they'll also throw in 2 ribeye or 2 New York strips. You get all of that for $110. Fill up that freezer. Let's get you ready to go for the summer. All right, joining us now, Cole Bagley, NHL and Utah Mammoth insider for KSLSports.com. Cole, first off, it was a fun atmosphere last night, but boy, there were some moments where it looked like Utah was far and away the better team, but boy, they let Winnipeg hang in there probably far too long in that game.
It's the entertainment factor, right? They had to make it a little bit interesting. Yeah. You got to keep the fans a little bit engaged and make them a little bit nervous. No, I mean, you're spot on. You know, there was no reason for Utah not to win that game with, you know, the number of players that, were sidelined for Winnipeg, the fact that Connor Hellebuck wasn't between the pipes. And, yeah, for the majority of the contest, Utah looked like the better team. But, what they learned and what's going to be an important lesson as they step into the playoffs is, one mistake can totally flip the momentum in a game. And that happened last night against the Jets is, Utah took kind of a no-nonsense type of penalty that, set them back. It gave the Jets an opportunity. They scored. And then, another mistake where Mackenzie Weegar, he kind of blew a tire near the blue line, and the Jets were right there to scoop up the puck and score on the breakaway. So, and that's just kind of what a lot of the guys have been talking to me about over the last week or so is, you get into the playoffs and, it's one play that can not only change a game, but it can change a series. So, an important lesson, but at the end of the day, they got it done. They locked up the top wildcard spot, and they now wait to see who's going to win the Pacific Division. So they'll face that team in the first round.
So if you had to pick a team that you want to see in the first round, who would that be?
Well, as of right now, it's either Vegas or Edmonton, and I definitely would go with Vegas. Not that it's necessarily the lesser of two evils. I mean, it's going to be tough no matter what. But, if you just look at the history that Utah has with those two teams, I think they're 3-3 or maybe 4-3 against the Vegas Golden Knights in the games that they've played through the first 2 years in their existence, with a positive goal differential. And when you look at Edmonton, and they've only beat Edmonton once out of 6 meetings, and the goal differential is plus 15 in favor of the Edmonton Oilers. And I know that fans are saying, well, they just beat Edmonton and, they're able to go toe-to-toe with them. Yeah, but that was an Edmonton team that was missing 2 of their best players. And, Leon Draisaitl, who is, probably a top 5 player in the entire world as of right now. And, it took Utah overtime and, a goal in overtime to beat the Oilers. So I am never going to bet against Connor McDavid in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And, if Utah wants a chance to advance to the second round, I think that Vegas, is the better opportunity. Not to say that I expect them to necessarily win that series, but it is a series that they could win. So, hopefully we can get things wrapped up and decided tonight. If Vegas is able to get just a point against Seattle tonight, then that will decide that they'll clinch the top of the Pacific, and we'll have our series decided.
So kind of lay out, I know that everything starts a little differently, but generally, when do you think things are going to kick off, and your home road schedules? Is it 2-2, 1-1-1, or how's the format in the first round for those that don't know?
Yeah, it's similar to the NBA. So you go 2-2, 1-1-1, and we should know here pretty quickly. To my understanding, the playoffs are going to start really fast. I mean, tomorrow is the last day of the regular season, and then I believe that the playoffs are set to begin on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Now, we won't know which day exactly the Mammoth are going to be playing on yet, but it's going to be quick. It's a quick turnaround. Tomorrow's game has no impact on the standings whatsoever for either team. Utah locked up the top wild card spot. Now they're just waiting to see who they're going to play. So I would expect, not necessarily a bunch of people to sit out tomorrow, but maybe a little bit less of an effort. Keep the guys warm. Maybe we'll see some of the younger guys get more of an opportunity, more minutes, more shifts, stuff like that. But it's going to be a quick turnaround, and Utah will either be headed to Las Vegas or Edmonton here in the next few days. I would anticipate they probably would head out on Friday just to get out there and get settled, and then we jump into games right away. It's 2 on the road and then 2 at home, and then if more games are needed, 1-1-1. So we'll see.
Yeah.
It's going to be really, really exciting.
Well, and there's no doubt that people are fired up for some meaningful games, whether football, hockey, or whatever. Basketball, hockey in the spring. We're used to seeing playoffs, and it's been 4 or 5 years. So the fact that you get that playoff-like atmosphere back in that building, when you look at the playoffs in the NBA, we're just used to officials swallowing their whistle a little bit more in NBA postseason than regular season. Is that the same with the NHL?
Yeah, I think so. The game becomes more physical, and not just like by a small margin. I mean, everything is tenfold. There's going to be way more physicality. There's going to be way more body checks. There's going to be a lot more jockeying for the puck and battling in the corners. And I was talking to Vitek Vanacek yesterday, and I just kind of started to pick some of the guys' brains. Right? I mean, this is my first time covering playoff hockey. At this level. And so I kind of was asking, how is the game the same, but how does it change? And, when I talked to Vanacek, he said that there are way more bodies in front of the net than there usually are. It's almost like there's twice as many skaters out on the ice. That's how much, more physical and more locked in and aggressive these teams are playing. So, yeah, I would say that they definitely let the guys play a little bit more. But if you cause an infraction, and it's pretty obvious, then you're going to go sit in the penalty box for a couple minutes.
When you look at the power play, I think Utah had 2 goals last night off of the power play. That seemingly has gotten better. I know we've talked about that in the past, but what do you really attribute the improvement of that play to?
Yeah, we were able to talk to Nick Schmaltz about that last night after the game. And, it's, for most of the year, Utah was like the first or second worst power play in the entire league. And it was kind of a head scratcher because they have such a talented unit. When you look at the 5 players that they're putting on the ice, you've got Clayton Keller, you've got Nick Schmaltz, Mikhail Sergachev, Dylan Gunther, Logan Cooley. So, a really talented, unit top to bottom with all sorts of different, talents and abilities, skill sets, lots of speed, lots of finesse, goal scoring and, facilitating. It's a very good unit, but their issue is that they just weren't shooting enough pucks, and they played very perimeter style hockey where, they would just kind of work it from, side to side. They would feed Mikhail Sergachev at the point, and then he would try to work it over to Dylan Gunther or Clayton Keller. And, teams, that's just predictable, and teams started to kind of figure that out. And so they would just, crowd the middle of the ice, and they would force Utah to shoot, and they'd make sure that their goaltender could see the puck, and that just is kind of where they struggled. But, Utah has since changed things, and that's what Schmaltz talked about, is they're putting a lot more shots on net. And that was obvious last night. Mikhail Sergachev was looking for his shot from deep constantly, and that's how Nick Schmaltz actually scored his first goal on the power play. Is, instead of working it over to Dylan Gunther for a one-timer, Mikhail kind of surveyed, saw that there were a lot of bodies in front, threw a really, well-placed shot up high that he knew was probably going to bounce off of a body, or if the goaltender was going to stop it, it was going to produce a rebound. And that's exactly what happened, and Schmaltz was able to, to put it in the back of the net. So for Utah, it's funny, right? I mean, there are these basics that go all the way back to when you're playing youth hockey of, if you want to score goals, go to the net. And if you want to, create opportunities, put pucks on net. And, Utah started to do that, and I think that's what's helped them to be so successful.
It's funny because when we talk to Bill Armstrong every week and we ask him questions about, from an X's and O's standpoint, what do you have to do to improve your power play? What do you have to do? And we're expecting some long, crazy, drawn-out answer in terms of, well, we got to do this and this and this. He's like, no, just exactly what you said. We got to put pucks on net. We just got to take some shots. And it's like, is it sometimes we make things a little bit more complicated than they need to be
100%.
because you just got to hoist up shots, and more often than not, that seems to be working for this team right now.
Make game day yours. Tickets, food and drinks, stats, and streaming. Everything you need is in the Utah Mammoth app. Download today and make game night easy. Download on both Android and iPhone. Tusk Top.
Yeah, it is. And, like I talked about earlier, I mean, hockey is interesting because it is a very complex sport. I mean, as a lot of people here in Utah have started to follow it and to fall in love with it and notice it, there are a lot of intricacies, right? I mean, what's icing and what's offside and, what constitutes a penalty. But when you boil it down, when you break it down, hockey, finding success in hockey is the same as it was in youth hockey, as it is at the NHL. Now, obviously, there's a lot more speed and skill involved, but, for these guys, it's just all about playing their game. And oftentimes the team that is able to, assert themselves in the offensive zone and thrive on the forecheck and trap the defense and move the puck and get pucks on net, get bodies in front. That's how you win hockey games, and as much as there is a lot of individual brilliance and speed and skill when you look at guys like Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon and Leon Draisaitl and even guys on the Mammoth. At the end of the day, it's very much a team sport, and it's a pretty simplified team sport, but it's about who can, play that game in its most, natural and truest form. And that's as a lot of the guys would say lately, that's just baseball.
If there's something that makes you nervous about the Mammoth going into postseason, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. Honestly, I think maybe a two-part question, two-part answer. I think the first one is this is still a young team, right? This is a team that they're experiencing growing pains. Now, they're different growing pains than they experienced 5 years ago, that they experienced 3 years ago, that they experienced last season. But, the key for this team is discovering how to play effective, impactful hockey that, goes along with their skill set and their brand as often as possible. When Utah has been successful, when they've won hockey games on a consistent basis, when they went on that 5-game winning streak to lock up a playoff spot, that was, in part due to the fact that they were able to weather adversity, that they were able to, play their style for, as many minutes throughout, 3 periods of hockey as often as possible. But when they've run into struggles, when they've had trouble like they did, when they lost the previous 2 games before winning last night, it was because they didn't play their style of hockey. They got lazy. They got lazy. They kind of towed the line. They thought that they could get away with certain things. And I think for a lot of teams, what separates the elite teams from the good teams from the poor teams is their ability to have the energy and the urgency for as many games as possible. That's what makes, the Colorado Avalanche and the Dallas Stars so dangerous, is they have figured out how to play their brand of hockey over 82 games, as many nights and as many minutes as possible, whereas Utah, they're young, right? They're inexperienced. A lot of these guys are – Dylan Gunther's only played 2 full seasons in the National Hockey League. Logan Cooley is only in his 3rd full year. And there's a handful of other guys that are just like that. So for Utah, I think, the biggest thing is, can they go into a 7-game series and play their game for most of those contests? If so, I'm not promising that they're going to win in the first round, but I think they'll make some noise. I think they'll push some teams, and they'll have an opportunity, depending on who they draw, to potentially, even win, to come out on top. And then I know that was kind of a long first part of the answer. The second, well, I'll make this a little bit shorter. The second part I would say is goaltending. Not that Karel Vejmelka is bad by any means, but he just hasn't been as good this year as he was last season. His save percentage is down about 7 or 8% total, which makes a big difference. And then there's just it's obvious that there's just not a lot of belief in Vitek Vanacek, and not that you necessarily need your backup, overly often in the playoffs. You're going to rely on your starter, but it helps, right? If there's confidence in both guys, if one guy has an off night, you can throw them in there, and they can make a big difference. So, long story short, I think maturity is going to be the most, the biggest thing for Utah, and then second would be, how good is their goaltending? How good is Karel Vejmelka going to be in the playoffs?
Well, you mentioned the drop he's had a little bit in his save percentage. I just saw this story where overall as a league, the save percentage has dropped below 90%. It's at 89.6. That's the lowest since 1994 for a regular season, if that number holds. Are you surprised by that number, and what do you attribute that to? No,
I'm not. I think it's kind of the game leveling itself out. I mean, for a long time, goaltenders just continued to get better and better and better, and save percentages were just going up and up and up. But then, you've seen kind of a reverse of that, and I think a lot of it has to do with just how much faster the game is, how much teams are prioritizing speed. When you look at the best players in the National Hockey League, it's guys that are the fastest players in the National Hockey League. Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon and Draisaitl, and even you look at the Mammoth. I mean, who is likely the most best player on this team, or at least has the most potential? It's Logan Cooley, because he not only has the finesse and incredible hands and incredible puck handling, but he has the speed, right? And that has just made goaltenders' jobs a lot harder. And I think you're starting to see a transition a little bit defensively. Who are the best defensemen in the National Hockey League? It's guys like Kale McCarr, and it's Quinn Hughes, and it's Zach Werenski. These are guys that have so much speed on the blue line, and they're jumping in offensively. I mean, if you look back at the Olympics, Quinn Hughes helped send the United States to the gold medal game against Canada by scoring an overtime winner against Sweden. A goal that he just took, he waved off the bench. He was actually supposed to go for a change. He waves him off. He says, "Coach, I've got this one." He dangles through the offensive zone. He puts in, he snipes the goaltender, and all of a sudden United States is playing for a gold medal. So I just think that speed is at such a premium in the National Hockey League, and it's changing the way that the game is played, and it's making it a lot tougher for goaltenders to make stops.
So, you had the late 90s, early 2000s when, you had the kind of essentially that dead puck era where hooking and holding and pretty much anything went. And the league said, okay, well, let's adjust this a little bit. We need to get our scoring up. And that certainly has gone up. Is the league, is that because I always know the NFL's very cognizant of that. They want offense to be there because that draws fans, but you also don't want it to turn it into the arena league. So they're always trying to balance the rules on offense versus defense, keep scoring up, but don't make it ridiculous. I think the NBA is dealing with some regular season issues where the scoring's getting a little out of control, and I think they may be trying to reel things back a little bit. Is that something that the NHL continually kind of works on and tweaks?
That's a good question. And to be honest, I'm not entirely certain at this point, but if you were to ask me my opinion, I don't know that hockey has ever been at a better place than it is right now. I don't know if the league has ever been this popular. If the game has ever been growing, to this extent. I mean, they just hit a milestone in terms of youth players, involved in USA Hockey throughout the entire country, and just with the excitement of the United States winning their first gold in 50, more than 50 years, and it just feels like right now the league is in a good place. Superstars are playing the game at just a very enticing and intriguing level. Fans are falling in love all over the place. There's talks of even more expansion. How things have gone here in Utah, where you came to maybe a non-traditional market, and this state and this community has just completely taken this thing and run with it. I think hockey's in a good spot. And yeah, I mean, if we get into the playoffs here and teams are if it's a 8-7 score every single night, then yeah, maybe the league needs to take a look at it. But I think right now it's in a good place.
Yeah, no doubt. Cole, we appreciate your time. It was good chatting with you yesterday. Fun game last night, and let's keep this thing rolling in the playoffs.
All right, thanks.
There he is, Cole Bagley, hockey and NHL Mammoth insider right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.